Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Data Delicacies, where we bring the best and brightest in the industries to talk all things tech, all things hospitality. And today have a very special guest because we play in the same fantasy league together. But no, honestly, Patrick is an awesome steward of the industry. We have a lot of great conversations. They like to float under the radar, but they're doing a lot of really cool stuff. So I have the pleasure of introducing Patrick Bobrukiewicz to our show today, the VP of Business Development at Nigel. Pat, thanks for jumping on. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you very much for having me today.
Of course, of course. So, want to kind of dive right into the meat of things here. We've seen point of sale evolve quite a bit over the last few years. Nigel is one of the players in this space, and we're seeing legacy platforms, new platforms come in with different offerings. I'd love to just get your kind of thought and how you're approaching this at Nigel, as to kind of how are you addressing what a point of sale should be for a restaurant and what the needs of restaurants are.
Yeah, for us, it really started. It really started at the on the restaurant side with our operational background, and then the technical background. So when we really talk about the operational background and the technical background, we really come to how Nigel was even formed to start off with. And Nigel really is a joint venture partnership between a company that's been operating restaurants for 40 years and another company that's been operating point of sale systems for about the same amount of time. And so we were able to join forces to solve these problems. And where it came from really initially was at Thrive Restaurant Group. They were staring down, the need for an upgrade path, and an upgrade path off of some of the legacy point of sale technologies, which I know we'll dive into here throughout different parts of today. But they needed to do some upgrades to the point of sale systems there, and they really found that looking at the market, when you looked out and said, well, what am I going to get for this upgrade? PCI compliance. Well, what else are we going to get for it? Maybe some more PCI compliance. How about the things that drive some value to the business, right? What about the upsell? What are the new sales tools that are available, or what are the new features for your staff, or anything like that? And we really found the market to be kind of lacking. And this was about 6 years ago. And at the time, John Roth, the president CEO of Thrive Restaurant Group, he had the opportunity to serve on a local board there in Wichita, with Wayne, who was the former CEO of High Touch Technologies, who had been the provider of point of sale systems to the rent to own space for a number of years, and said, hey, you guys have been in the point of sale business. We've been in the restaurant business. What if we just put our Midwestern roots together and we just go after just taking care of restaurant operators again? And we just blue jeans and Midwestern style. And, what if we just service the restaurant industry like the service industry that it really is, right? And I know this is really crazy to think about for a technology company, because normally they would be in there and they'd be after one of a few plays, right? A data play or a hardware play or something along those lines, maybe a card processing fee play or something else that was driving them. Really, we were like, hey, let's do something that we would want to do for ourselves. And we were afforded that opportunity. So when you say, like, what do you look at doing different? It's really, let's just take care of restaurant operators like we have wanted to be taken care of by our tech partners for the longest time. That's really what drove a lot of the why behind what we wanted to do.
That's I love hearing that, because I think sometimes we forget that we're a hospitality industry and it's hospitality first, right? We're not tech people trying to sell in hospitality. We're not a payment processing trying to do this. We're hospitality people trying to help people in hospitality, which I think sometimes can get construed with the way some of these companies are trying to scale or do what they have to do.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that really is something that I've taken in my entire career as an opportunity. I started off as a dishwasher and a cashier and a line cook. And I'm an old restaurant operator at heart, first and foremost. And having been, in a VP of biz dev role before, I've always taken really the approach of, it makes no sense to lie to get a client on, or to get someone using the system. If you lie to them, they're only going to leave you in 6 months anyhow, right?
Yeah.
So if you just, again, maybe it's the Midwestern, just that kind of good, honest homegrown roots here, right? Where you just want to say, no, the system does this or it doesn't do that. Is it going to be the right thing to fit in your business? Be a great human. And then make sure that you have great support systems in there, not just try to go close a sell on a deal, right? And that's just something that, having sat on both sides of the table, having been the one trying to purchase the software and having someone, kind of tell you the little stretch of does it really do that or not, and
Yeah.
they kind of check the box but not fully. When you live both of those worlds for long enough, you kind of look back at it and go, hey, I don't want to be the person who tells you anything other than 100% the honest truth. That way you're making the right decision for your business the same way that I would have wanted to make the right decision for my business.
I love that. And I think we're seeing now so many point of sales in the space and just tech platforms in the space that, you know, kind of the value prop that they have, is it truly beneficial for restaurants? It's hard to say, right? Like it's almost like they become, the restaurants end up becoming like numbers on the balance sheet that it's like, hey, we need more and more and more and more. And, is the feature functionality that's coming out, is it truly benefiting them, right? So I think, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, as we're starting to see a shift in how point of sales are being built or being modified or, from legacy to cloud, wherever that looks like, how do you see that change happening, right? Because I think one of the things that we've noticed on our side is that there are so many other niche parts of the ecosystem that point of sales maybe don't solve. And then now restaurants are going to have to go out and go to a vendor A, B, C, and D for all these different things, which again, it just becomes another sales cycle they have to go through, another platform, another integration, right? So how are you seeing kind of that involvement of what point of sale can offer, and where you think it should go as the next few years of this industry pass by?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And you would probably, if you asked 10 people, I bet you'd probably get at least 9 or 10 different answers, right, of where they think that's going to go. In my version of that crystal ball, I think you are going to see some more BYOD. You're going to see some more bring your own device sort of things where people are trying to encourage, guests to, bring their own devices into the ordering fray, whether that's off-prem and coming to on-prem. I think we've already seen the introduction of more tabletop hardware to kind of, I'll say, kind of stand up some of the other legacy technologies that have been out there for a while that don't have that table experience. Certainly, we've all seen a number of checkout with the QR code sort of things and stuff like that, where you always talk about whether it's a software play or a hardware play or something like that. But it truthfully, if you get right down to it, it's really they're all covering on the surface the underlying issue, which is that a lot of our larger brands in the restaurant industry are still stuck on some older legacy point of sale systems that need to be upgraded. And with COVID and everything that happened during that time frame, all of the new technology that we rolled out into the field was done with probably a little bit less training than we would have liked to, since we couldn't get out into the field to do the training appropriately. So I think what we're seeing right now is you have a lot of legacy hardware sitting out in the stores with some newer technology that's software or a slight little bit of hardware addition to them that are trying to be sort of propped up right now. And I think we're at a really precarious point in this decision-making line where some groups are going to have to make that initial hardware decision and start to go with some other systems. So at Nigel, the way that we've kind of looked at that is, let's make sure that we're building the very, very best hardware platform that we can put inside of the locations, and couple that with the appropriate software so that it's effectively gives you kind of the tank and the resiliency that you've had with the hardware the hardware purchases that we were used to for yesteryear of a point of sale system, with all of the latest and greatest new web technologies. With one big difference, we're not necessarily trying to say that you have to be using all of our software, all of our full tech stack, and we see a lot of groups who do that with their point of sale system, where they're trying to say you have to use our back office or our payment processing or our something, whatever. With Nigel, we want you to control your own technology stack, right? So what we want to do is offer a really, really great point of sale system that lets you build that tech stack and be nimble as the market changes because no, there's no way that my crystal ball is that much sharper than anyone else's, right? So what we can offer is a better way to make you more nimble in the equation as we're going through this. That way, you're not finding yourself stuck on some older legacy hardware or something down the lines, or paying through the nose to get all of these new systems integrated. The open API architecture comes in to help you there.
Yeah, no, I love to hear that. I mean, that sense of being nimble, I think is so crucial today because I mean, you look at just even, this whole wave of AI chatbots and voice technology, right? And people are wanting to adopt it because they almost have to stay ahead of the trends. But if kind of like the core brain of your ecosystem doesn't allow you to do that, then maybe you're falling behind, or it doesn't let you, because it's such a competitive space now, right? And then you have everything you can do to get customers into your door, spending money, and then coming back over and over again. I think that's what we're seeing a lot of folks face. And I mean, we're seeing, an unprecedented amount of restaurant bankruptcies as well, right? Because they haven't been able to probably adapt and be nimble.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And as we continue to see those turbulent waters, for our restaurant industry, I think that you're going to see that the groups that lean in a little bit more heavily to that front-facing guest technology and have a point of sale partner there that can support them in doing that, and not being someone who is slowing down that progress for them in a sense, because a point of sale partner who is not trying to stay open, both from a connectivity standpoint, from a partner program standpoint for their own integrations, things like that, that can really lead you down a path of being less nimble than you would like to be in the market, just because of your choice in your point of sale partner.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see now. I think we're starting to see more of the point of sales, which kind of tends to be like the anchor for a lot of the groups, or like, bigger restaurant groups of like, hey, based on the point of sales, who I choose my partner network. And we're starting to see more of them open up their APIs, right? Because I think this concept of open APIs in this industry wasn't necessarily a thing. And if it did, it was you had to go through multiple walls to even get there. And even still, it wasn't probably the best kind of the workflow for the restaurant or for the consumer who was kind of the end user of it. Now we're starting to see waves of companies either start with an open API, kind of more of a platformization strategy, or start to build those APIs out.
Right. And if it wasn't for some of the other partners in the space, though, like an Incentivio who pulls more of those features together into one place, or from some of the other partners who are doing, like those DSP aggregations like Stream and other partners like that, if we didn't have an opportunity to have tools like that in place, we would still be sitting there with tablets from every single DSP, bringing them in. So hardware on top of hardware on top of hardware to solve the problem, as opposed to using technology and using some of the newer APIs and things like that. As we're able to do that now, that world is changing very rapidly. You have to have a partner who's ready to change very rapidly with you during those times.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny you mention that because I think it's this constant debate of like, hey, is it best of breed, or do I want everything under one roof in one sense? But now with the advancement of APIs and the way that technology can write into each other's platforms, you can provide that same seamless under one roof experience, even though you're going a best of breed path.
Yep, you absolutely can. That's one of the great things. If you have the right partners in your ecosystem, that you can get more done with the right partners than you can by just picking just strictly the best technology.
Yeah.
Definitely, that's a word of encouragement that I have in any kind of business for any friends or anything like that is definitely make sure that you're looking for the right partner in the space, and then evaluate their technology too. So make sure you have the right folks in the room. Before just vetting out, does it do X or does it do Y?
Yeah, yeah. Want to kind of take a step back, more kind of a look at the industry here. I mean, we briefly talked about it, this whole concept of AI ML. As much of it as a buzzword, it's also becoming table stakes for a lot of folks. I mean, I know especially in our world, on the marketing side, a lot of folks want to use, AI models to help with their marketing and messaging and personalization, which again, the computers and the machines can do it a lot quicker than humans can, but the humans can then go and execute on the thing. On the Nigel side, how are you looking at that? And what are you seeing from your customers, or what are you seeing in the next 6 to 12 months as things that are going to become table stakes?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that you can look at from an AI standpoint has to do with the speed of order and order entry. So looking at using things like voice AI, could you be entering anything a little bit more rapidly if you had anything that you were contextually hearing while you were taking the orders? Could you look at anything that is the number of keystrokes, the placement of buttons on screens, any things like that, where you can speed the order entry? I think that those things have been large time savings. Anything that you can do where you're increasing the order size also and suggesting that back out. So doing sort of any sort of item attachments or item sentiment, guests that are ordering, X tend to order Y with it. Anything that you can do along those lines, definitely some big upticks there. And then I think the other one that we have a large opportunity to kind of look at with AI is all of the hardware that's inside of our stores too. They're continually putting out information, whether be it like their battery lives, things like that. You can know about the hardware that's going on in the location and start to actually monitor some of that along with all of the peripheral things that are hooked up to your POS as well. So I think that there's a big play there around AI in the hardware space also, and then also in all of the code generation that you were talking about earlier. I think that you're going to see a lot more of the API barriers kind of coming down here in the near future as software engineers. You commonly ask, how much code are you writing these days?
Yeah.
That number is going down
Yeah.
with more code generation than code writing.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting because I think there's a unlimited amount of applications for AI, and I think I'd love to get your take here because I mean, typically what we're seeing is actually it's a mix, but for the most part, what we see as a trend is that some of the bigger brands will, because they have the ability to maybe experiment with some of the stuff or they have the bandwidth to maybe apply it properly, they will kind of be the first adopters of some of this stuff and then it trickles down. But now what we're also starting to seeing is, very savvy operators coming to the space that are trying to scale using this technology like AI and ML because they know that they can scale at a much rapid pace because it's like, it's a 1 + 1 = 5 type of thing. So what are you seeing on your side? Because I know you work with a lot of the bigger names, but are you also seeing some of the smaller folks come in with that same mentality?
They are to a lesser degree. I think that we've seen this for a while is that, restaurant operators tend to have a lot of data and information available to them. Less frequently though, I think you find are there really heavy investments into the analysis of that data. So you become very data rich and sometimes though, because of that, insight poor. So you'll have a lot of the data there, but even like the item associations and things like that of items that were sold with items, asking sometimes very simple questions like that of operators. They sometimes just don't have the time to go get that information, from their analyst or from their area managers who may be, even trying to perform that analysis from them, right? Depending on how close it starts to run when you get into some of those smaller groups. As soon as you get up, I'd say, probably above the, 75 or 100 store mark, usually somewhere around in there for a given brand, you start to see where there's a lot more of an investment in sort of the data analyst and AI modeling and stuff like that. And that's where a lot of the suggestive features and the marketing, the segmentation comes into play.
Yeah.
And I think the automation of the segments for a lot of businesses inside of their tools to understand those guests that either they thought they were going to start to make some traction with, and then they didn't come back for that third visit, or for the ones where they did come back for the third visit, they were there with you for a little while, and then all of a sudden they tapered off. It's easy to go make those segments for the first time. It's hard to tell you that you needed to make the segment to track it for the first time. That's where the AI models can start to really help you learn things and alert you about data anomalies inside of your data set, as opposed to you having to go look for and search for. I think that's going to be probably the biggest thing that happens to us in the restaurant industry in the next 3 years is when we have AI and bots starting to suggest the things that we should be looking at as opposed to us configuring the things we want to look at.
Yeah, yeah. And without sharing too much from our side, it's a lot of very exciting stuff that we're trying to solve here. Because I think to your point, there's no shortage of data, right? There's a ton of data. There's always been data. But now the data is only as good as whoever it is on the other side that can execute on the data. But again, if you're just giving them a bunch of dashboards, which I think, most platforms can be like, hey, we have the dashboards, we have this, but it's like, it can also be overwhelming, right? You have so much stuff, and it's like, okay, well, what do I do now? Right? Like, where do I go with this? I think if the AI models can definitely be taught to now be very prescriptive and say, hey, listen, Patrick is part of our coffee lovers group. He comes in this often. Here's a specific item that he likes. If we run this campaign at this time of day with this much of spend, this is the ROI we can potentially generate, right? So I think it's way more prescriptive and giving you kind of a clearer picture of like what it can do versus like, hey, here's like a bunch of numbers and segmentation, all this stuff. Go figure out your own thing. I think that's a cool bridge to gap to really get that value out of it.
And another thing that we'll start to get out of this too, and this is a lot less AI and computer tech, but more about the one-to-one human marketing, but that is enabled by the technology that we have at our fingertips. And that is something as simple as, hey, Arun, I know you're part of this coffee lover group that you were just talking about. That's really great. How about the fact that at the cash register, I just said, hi, Arun,
Yeah.
something that simple because I knew it was you could be enabled, right? So we're looking at things even like for while you're in line. What are
Mhm.
you someone who comes in this frequently with us? Maybe you're a gold star person. Maybe you should be able to jump the line. Looking at incentives that are no longer just like point-based things, but that are more of a an enabled one-to-one human interaction that
Mhm.
comes out of this because we're still in a human service business. And as much as we want to automate it to save more money, and there's a lot of validity in that, but it's still a human business, and we still have that one-to-one interaction with our guests when they come in the restaurants. We need to really make sure that we take care of them.
Yeah, I love that
Giving them
sense.
that one-to-one matters.
I love that sentiment, right? It's like you can have all the tech in the world, but really what creates the experience, what creates the connection is that human element where sometimes that can get lost. And I think I've seen, we all have our favorite hole in the wall restaurants or bars that we go to. And part of it is like they may not have the best food or the best whatever. It's because they know you. You walk in, hey
Yep.
Patrick, we got your favorite drink ready, got your table ready, got whatever, you're by the TV for the football, whatever it looks like. I think I know for myself, I have a ton of those places here in Toronto. And a lot of folks we've had on the show, and you talk to them about like, hey, what are some of your favorite places you go to, your favorite dining experiences? It's not so much, hey, the food was whatever, or the tech around the restaurant. It was more the waiter had a great experience. The bartender gave us like it was some human aspect or element that made that experience memorable, which I think sometimes gets lost with all the tech that surrounds us all the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's still a human business. It truly, truly is. And truly, and when you look at it, even from the technology place, and I mentioned that in the very beginning of our call here, really is that it's a human business, and it's a human business even at a vendor to client level. It's a human business. And one of the key things that I think is really, really interesting about Nigel, and one of the things that drove me to really want to be a part of it from the beginning, is it's that love of the business. It's the love of the humans that are in the business. Nigel, we actually test our code in our own locations
Mhm.
before it ever goes out into our production environments for anything. And I started thinking to myself, once upon a time ago, I should use that as like a sales thing. And I was like, no, I should just tell people that we do it because
Yeah.
it's just who else can say that? Who else can say, no, we put our code in our test environment in our live restaurants before it ever goes out into anyone else's restaurants. And I started thinking that's a really cool thing to be able to say. We really care so much about our partners that we're willing to make sure that it's us that fails first before we would ever get to a partner.
Yeah, and I think that, it's kudos to y'all for doing that because I mean, I've been big into at companies that I've worked with. I see it a lot in industry where, companies will come out with features that sometimes they're like, oh, this is like the coolest thing, but like restaurant operators are like, yeah, but like I don't need this, right? Or like it's cool to the vendor side, but the operator is kind of like, I mean, I need this to work before I even get there. And I think sometimes there's a there's this need to make things like overly complex to show that it's like, oh my God, we're doing all this cool stuff that's so complex. But like sometimes restaurant operators are still here, right? They haven't even got to that level of sophistication where like this thing could even be worthwhile for them. They're just trying to keep the lights on. They're trying to get guests in the door. And it's like, how can you make it as simple as possible for them? I mean, the thing I always use in my head is like, hey, can I explain this to my grandma? Can my grandma use it? Right? Like it has to be that simple and
Yeah.
that easy. Because if it isn't, then try to launch this across 100 location group with a bunch of franchisees and folks that are working there that maybe that are students and not there whole time. Like how do you get that full buy-in? And if the way you're planning it out, it sounds like you make sure it works within your own group before even making, otherwise how can you sell that elsewhere?
That's exactly right. And getting that opportunity to partner with the operators who are using it in the field ahead of time and get their feedback has been invaluable in the entire process. Their partnership and having the teams out there, in the field interacting with the guests every single day. That's been one of the biggest values, biggest upsides that I can think of that makes it really unique. Being here at Nigel and being able to partner with those folks.
Nice. And that's refreshing to hear because I think that it shows how much y'all care and what the work you're putting into is, kind of tasting your own medicine before kind of like passing it out to others. I think that's a key thing. Last question for you, Pat, as we kind of wrap up on time here is what are some, you mentioned a few things, but just taking more of a step back, what are some of the cool piece of technology you see coming out or cool trends you see coming out over the next 6 to 12 months that are going to really reshape the way hospitality tech is looked at?
I think some of the things that we have coming up here really soon, the idea of all of our web ordering and everything being done on a more personal and one-to-one basis, I think you're going to see everything lean a lot more heavily into that. When's the last time that you were using, let's say, like a Delta or a United app, and they didn't already know that you like aisle seats, right? Or the last time you checked into a Marriott or something like that, and they didn't already know that you like the pillow or you choose to take the points and the points reward and not the
Right.
additional water to check into your room with and the cookie or whatever. Like there's little things like that that I think you're going to see a lot more personalization that's going to come in our space. I think that's going to be pretty heavily dominating here over the next few years. I think another big one is going to be the introduction of video AI. So video AI, things up at the front door, whether that be guest recognition, item sentiment based on the video and the actual the view of someone's face while they're looking at that particular thing on the menu. There are a lot of technologies out there that are replacing the need of a time and motion study by putting a fish view camera over the top of your kitchen line because then you can do order accuracy and things like that when to go bagging. There the possibility that video AI around in and around point of sale and in and around guest interaction is going to be huge over the next probably 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, it's exciting. I've been following a lot of that, just even outside of hospitality, just some of the applications I've seen, like text to video creation, where, full on like real life, what looks like really real life videos just off text, right? It's super cool.
Yeah,
I think we've only scratched the surface in terms of like what that can look like. I mean, I've even seen I mean, I'm a gamer. I'm not ashamed to admit it, but I've seen a lot of older video games kind of like redone with new gen AI, and it looks
yeah.
like you're playing like real life. And it's scary to think how that kind of stuff will look like media, how we ingest media over the next few years, but how content creation now can become such a quick thing with just someone behind a computer rather than having a whole production set. It's exciting to see kind of where that goes.
I completely agree with you. I think another big thing that we're going to see in our space as well is the introduction of auto driving cars. I think we just saw a video the other day of that happening where we had an Uber Eats delivery done driverless.
Mm.
So I think as we start to kind of look at what that will do to the space and how the delivery of our food out to our guests, I think that will also change here, whether it be be it with drone technologies or the self-driving cars. I think it's going to be a really, really great 3 years here. I'll call it in front of us to
Yeah.
really see where some of those technologies really start to head.
Yeah, I think robotics is another one too. I think we're seeing a lot of it. I mean, I know Tesla did the big release of, I think I saw a video of one of the Tesla bots being a bartender, like checking an ID and
Yeah.
then making a cocktail, which, it's crazy to see how that's going to, be commonplace, like the stuff we saw in movies, right? But in a lot of countries, in East Asia, they've had that in place for quite some time now.
Yeah. And in some cases we're a little bit behind the curve in some of
Yeah.
the robotics technologies that we have available to us, even over here in the U.S. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just as long as they don't turn on it, I think we'll be okay. But
This is okay. This is okay. Unplug them if they do.
yeah, yeah. So, Patrick, coming up on time here, I want to thank you again. You shared a lot of great stuff. Typically, how we end each episode is with a quick lightning round. So I'm just going to shoot off a few questions to you. First thing that comes to mind, let's hear it. So first thing first, for everyone to know, who's your favorite football team?
Kansas City Chiefs, Mahomes, all the way. Let's go.
Are you,
Repeat.
are you guys going to win it again this year?
I cautiously optimistic. How about that? I don't want to jinx us. Cautiously optimistic.
Okay, love it. Favorite cocktail or drink of choice right now?
Favorite cocktail would be probably Knob Creek on the rocks. I'm a simple guy.
Oh,
I'm from the Midwest, man.
yeah, yeah, love it. Yeah, love a good Knob Creek, man. That's a good choice there. If you were to start your own restaurant tomorrow, what would be the theme and what would be the vibe?
I would probably go with some form of a fast casual Asian, something along those lines. And I would think that the vibe for sure would have a little bit of a younger vibe for I'll call it the mid 20s to going into early 30s kind of diner, something along those lines. So there definitely be a tech play to it. Definitely would have
Cool.
a young vibe feel, something that would be a new thing where you're trying to replicate the magic of Chipotle from 5 years ago.
Nice. Love it. Yeah, it's to that point, seeing uh I get the fortune of getting to travel a lot for, with this role and going a lot of different places and seeing so many cool creative pop-ups like concepts come up now. It's I love to see it, right? Fusions that you would never think of before, concepts and just even like when you go into them, the experience that they provide. I think it's what I love about the tech now, and I always try to be an optimist about this stuff, is I think it's just going to bring out more creativity in general. And it's just going to make that experience of going out even more fun now with all the cool things that we see. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I love where our space is right now, both from a technology standpoint
Excited.
and from an introduction of new ingredients standpoint. I'm really excited about the
Yeah,
restaurant industry over the next 3 to 5 years.
love it. Last question for you. If you had to shout out your favorite restaurant in your city, what would the restaurant be and what was your favorite dish at that restaurant?
Oh, okay. Man, you're really putting me on the spot with that one. Favorite restaurant in Kansas City. I'm gonna have to probably go with Joe's KC Barbecue. That's you've got to go there. You've got to go to the gas station if you come to town. It's really, I mean, oh man, yeah, that pulled pork is something else. Anytime you can get barbecue in KC, that's definitely a
Okay.
go. And the
I'm
guys at
gonna
Joe's
note
do it
that
really
down.
well.
I'm gonna note that down. Good to know. Okay. Love it. Pat, I can't thank you enough for joining. You shared a lot of cool stuff. I mean, we've had tons of chats where we can go for hours, but I think the theme of today's show was kind of about the point of sale and the evolution of what we're seeing and just tech in general. So I just kind of want to highlight a few of the things you brought up today is, this concept of how restaurants want to stay nimble and the tech that's in the restaurant should be enabling them to do that and not holding them back from doing it. And I think we're starting to see some of the legacy platforms, people make that shift because they've realized that, hey, like there's more nimble ways to run the business. And with the advent of how technology and consumer preferences are changing so quickly, you have to be nimble. Otherwise, you don't end up another bankruptcy stat, which we're seeing quite a few of now today. And I
Yeah.
think the other key piece I took out of this was ultimately this is a human business, right? So you can, we're all tech providers and we're all doing this stuff and this AI and this ML, but at the end of the day, it's that human to human connection, and the tech should really be enabling that. And, as a restaurant operator, your culture should be to, hey, how can we enhance that human experience? Because that's what gets people to come back, which I couldn't agree with more. I think, everyone listening, favorite dining experiences always have some sort of people component to it, whether you're by yourself and have that good experience with the person at the cash register or with a group of people. That's always been, my favorite stuff. So, Pat, any last parting words before we wrap up here?
Just to say thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Likewise, I know we had hours and hours of conversations. They can go on forever. Yes. Appreciate the friendship probably more than anything. Thank you very much.
Of course, Patrick. Again, thank you for jumping on. Again, Patrick, VP Business Development over at Nigel. If you want, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, at nigel.com. is probably the easiest way. Again, Patrick B at nigel.com.
Okay. Perfect. And yep, we'll be sharing all the Patrick details as we launch this episode. Again, we launch episodes every Wednesday. I'm your host, Arun. This was hosted by Incentivio. This was another episode of Data Delicacies. Thank you all for tuning in. As again, we love to continue the conversation. So as we post this, if you want to reach out to me, please, we always love to we're trying to push the industry forward. And this is how we do it, by connecting the dots, getting great people together. So please reach out to myself, to Patrick, to talk, or you can see us at a conference floor and we can share a Knob Creek on the Rocks where we can chat a little bit more. So until next time, thanks all for tuning in. Thanks, Pat. Appreciate you jumping on.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.